peaking is often a misunderstood concept when I think about just the League of Legends landscape and the terminology and whatnot. And I think this concept could actually help a lot of teams and a lot of players, especially players that don't necessarily understand maybe their own mindset in terms of how much effort that they can put in within a given season or a split. And so peaking generally, as the concept is described, is a way into which you can give out the highest level of performance of what you can do within your capabilities at a specific time frame. And generally this time frame would be at a very crucial point within the season, right? So like say in playoffs, for instance, in spring split or summer split, or maybe peaking for MSI or worlds or whatnot. So this is a very crucial concept and kind of a way to maximize how your performance can be kind of illuminated in essence, right? And the reason why I bring this up is obviously because of Cloud9 and how they failed to get to Worlds and how they had that phenomenal run in Spring Split. They were the most dominant team in the entirety of LCS. They go into Summer Split, they're dominating the first half and whatnot. Nobody can fucking touch them whatsoever. And then they just bomb out in the second half. And for sure, it's one of the worst letdowns within the history of the LCS in essence. I'm not going to say it's the worst one. I think that's up for debate though. But certainly very high up there. And so you begin to wonder if maybe their issue was just peaking, right? And it just the simple concept of peaking, because we all know that all of those players are very good players. They proved it in the spring split, obviously. They proved it, beforehand in the early parts of summer split of 2020. So, why not after that? And, maybe some people are blaming meta and whatnot, or, what have you, or maybe practicing issues. But yeah, I think it is kind of a culmination of all of that. But if anything, I would use Spring Split as, to expand maybe your champion pool, expand your playbook a little bit, and kind of develop your play style towards the latter parts of Spring Split, the split that, famously doesn't matter, and then kind of go from there, and with that knowledge, go into Summer Split and play with what you're good at, right? You expanded your playbook, and now you kind of know what works and what doesn't for your team. And so now this is try hard mode in essence. And I just think teams don't have this concept of being able to peak when it's very appropriate, right? Because you have League of Legends as an esport has probably one of the longest competitive seasons out of any esport currently today. We compete probably, I would say, like nine months out of the entire year if you're a top performing team. And then God forbid if you're an all-star player, then you have to do all-stars on top of that. So it's a very competitive and very grueling tournament schedule. So you obviously have to pace yourself, and you obviously have to peak at appropriate different times and allow yourself to rest in those circumstances to where, the matches kind of don't matter, right? And everyone likes to say that all matches matter, but no, all matches don't fucking matter. Don't confuse this with all lives matter. Different topic. Anyways, so for older players, I think they've already begun kind of recognizing the benefits of peaking, right? You think of players like Impact famously, to where he turns it up into playoffs, and you get the Impact playoff buff, right? To where he just goes Hulk. He's really good in lane. He's very capable of outplaying any ganks, doing 2v1s, getting one kill in a 2v1 or something like that. So he's just phenomenal when it comes to when the pressure is on. And I don't want to mistake this for being a clutch player. I think those are two different things in essence, right? Versus a clutch player is basically a player into which can deal with the pressure that the circumstance currently has in and of itself, but he does it from maybe round to round or game to game or whatnot, right? Versus the entirety of a season or what have you. That doesn't really matter because that's more, I think, of a peaking aspect to where they've allow themselves to gradually up themselves in terms of their mentality to take games more and more serious as things progress more and more and matches maybe get more and more important in that sense. But I think clutch is a little bit different of a factor because it takes into account that specific game or that specific moment rather than maybe the entirety of the expanse of a couple different games and what that next game leads into, the other game or whatnot. And they, of course, have some crossover, but, So then you have a player like Soaz. Now, I know Soaz is not the hottest topic right now in terms of being able to play good, but he did take a break in terms of just citing that he was a little bit burnt out. But he was actually, I think, one of the players that managed how to not be burned out from the game quite well in terms of that. It was famous that he would not practice as much in the very beginning of the season or very beginning of a split, and then he would ramp up, and especially in playoffs, he would definitely be on his A game and whatnot. You think a double lift, same shit, right? Where he famously said that spring split doesn't matter. Summer split comes in, banging guns and everything. Masters Senna, which no one expected whatsoever, right? He brings out Senna, and he ends up dominating with it, ends up getting it banned sometimes in the playoffs, and it's just like this ridiculous level. And then, of course, you have Bjergsen, he's consistently good throughout the split. That's no doubt. But when he's on his high, like, that's when it really matters. That's when, like, he really turns it up and he cranks it from fucking medium high to high, in order to sear that ass. So, like, he's obviously a player, too, that is capable of peaking itself. And I think just this concept of peaking, I guess, is more apparent in CSGO because it's due to the teams having boot camps right before a tournament or a major or whatnot or a minor, whatever that they're trying to do and compete in a tournament. They do a boot camp to where they all go into a gaming house and they all practice for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it's grueling sessions, but after that and after the tournament, they all kind of take a break a little bit, wind down and whatnot, and then go back at it again and do another boot camp. So I think this whole idea of peaking in terms of Counter-Strike Go is just more readily apparent because they have this separation of personal life and, competitive esports life, more so than the League of Legends Pro. But I think also that's because our circuit is just more compact in that sense, and so there's less downtime, and maybe that means there's more burnout, which then means that it's probably more important for you to peak at the correct time, right, and to manage how you peak as a player. And of course, I make this akin to, I'm going to give you another car analogy here. I make it similar to running a car with a street tune versus a race tune. So it's very common that a lot of modified cars have a street tune and a race tune. And sometimes this is separated from the ECU to where, you could just click a button and it pops over to your race tune. But in the most common way is it's based upon your boost controller, if your car is turboed, which a lot of high performance cars are, right? Because people realize that turbo is king. Anyways, so you have this low boost and high boost. So, you might be running like 12 psi in just your regular street tune versus you might be running 18 psi or 20 psi or something in your race tune. So those are two different things, but the reason why you have those two different modes is so that you don't fuck up your motor or don't wear out your motor more than you should, right? Even though it's appropriately tuned, for each aspect and whatnot. And, you might have enough fuel and air for each different mode. That still doesn't matter in terms of the stress that you're putting on your motor itself. It's a motor that's making 250 horsepower to a motor that's making 350 or something. So like you jump up another 100 horsepower. And, I don't think Fast and Furious was that far off, when they had those little NOS buttons on the fucking steering wheel. It's like, yeah, actually NOS does like put a lot of strain on your engine because if you don't know, NOS, essentially what it does is it releases a chemical into your air combustion, right? And it puts out nitrous oxide, which agitates oxygen particles to make them more compact to where now you can fit more oxygen particles, which then means that you can put more fuel in, right? Which then means that you can create a bigger bang, which then means you create more horsepower. So it's the same shit. And so that's why famously, and like all those racing movies and whatnot, they only hit the NOS when they're doing like a serious race or whatnot, and then they hit the extra second set of NOS, and like there's different shots of NOS. Anyways, I won't fucking bore you, but it's very similar to car culture or racing in the sense that there's a street tune and there's a race tune, and you got to know which one to fucking use, or else if you use your race tune the entire time, you're probably gonna blow your engine before you would like to, because running higher horsepower comes with some faults. So I think this is very a missing concept within League of Legends itself. I kind of would like to make a comparison again to psychology in terms of how a lot of people, or I guess the mind itself and the human mind, has difficulty sleeping in new areas. And that's because when you sleep in a new area, say if you sleep in a new hotel room, right, and you're on travel or whatnot, it's because part of your mind, your like prehistoric type shit, is active because it's looking out for danger, right? So you're super on heightened senses, and like your subconscious mind is looking for these different threats and whatnot. So you're always in this hyper mode, right? Because you're ready to fight, you're ready to go because you're in this new territory and your systems are all on go. Well, that's what I think in terms of if you're just trying to go on through the LCS spring split and summer split and MSI and Worlds and All Stars and all this shit, you're gonna get fucking burnt out. And like the adrenaline is just fucking pumping through you. It's wearing through your fucking body and everything, wearing all through your mind. And it's very taxing and tiring for the psychological aspect of the player himself. So I think just the concept of peaking should be a little bit more considered, especially from just a professional player's aspect. Like, forget the teams, fuck the teams, right? They want to try and eke out all that they can from you, right? They probably won't accept you not playing the game as seriously or not, putting in all these amount of hours and whatnot. And I think that's why we've gotten to where we've gotten, is because, any employer is going to want you to work extra hours and whatnot, right? Especially if those extra hours, it doesn't mean that you gain any more fucking money anyways, right? So in essence, players need to look out for themselves and just take into consideration how they peak in terms of their mental aspect of how they operate within this esport, because as we know, most of what this game is very mental. Some part of it, of course, is physical, but it's mostly mental. And so just as the same concept of peaking and letting your muscles rest, before you go out to a weightlifting championship or some shit, right? That's the same thing with esports. You need to let your mind rest a little bit in order for it to go into overdrive later on. Let your brain muscle recover to where you can perform at very peak performance. So I just think pros should consider this a lot more, and maybe they'll actually end up upping their game when it comes to playoffs or worlds or big tournaments in that essence.